Hello and welcome, everyone, to the Catholic Money Mastermind podcast. I'm Ben Martinek, your host, and I'm joined today by two other members of the Catholic Financial Planners Network. Mike Acosta, he's been on the show multiple times and sitting to become a familiar old face. So, Mike, it's great to have you back on the show today.
Excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation we have today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to have you. And we're also joined by Ujae Kang out of the Twin Cities area. We've had Sarah previously, his wife, on the show, but Ujae decided to step in. We got the beauty and the brawn, I think, in your business. Is that right, Ujae?
Beauty and what?
The beauty and the brawn.
Mine?
Yeah, the brawn is it's the muscle, in the business. So Sarah's the beauty, and then you're the brains. Maybe might be the better way to describe it, right?
I don't know. That's totally accurate, but yes, let's go with that.
Well, it sounds good. Well, Ujae, so for folks who may not be familiar with you have a financial advisory firm in the Twin Cities area. Is that right? It's UAK. Diversified?
Yes, it's UAK Diversified out of St. Paul, Minnesota. St. Paul, Minnesota is one of the Twin Cities.
Great. And then for Mike, where could people find you if they wanted to find you?
Yeah, so we're located out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have my own firm, Genesis Wealth Planning.
Fantastic. All right, so we got a little bit of the North and the South going on today in our conversation. So thanks everyone for joining us. The conversation we're having, I think, is a relevant one, and it's really brings into this question of how to transition through different parts of one's life, and how to think through those life transitions. That really the decision, like what should you be considering as you make a large life decision, and this could be starting off with a career, or potentially transitioning to another career, or a relocation, or could be possibly, having, getting married or having children even. But, the question that we really want to be thinking about, and we'll be discussing most at length today, is the question of retirement and knowing when it's time to retire, and just what are, part of the considerations that ought to be top of mind, in that decision. So, Ujae, as we were chatting ahead of the call, some of the things that come to mind, with that retirement question is, there's usually a financial asset question, aspirationally, like, do you have enough resources to retire at this point in time? But then there's usually kind of a life satisfaction, job requirement, or concerns also driving that decision. I suppose to think about this initially on that financial asset side, what's been your experience in helping clients evaluate whether or not they have the resources to retire? Like what comes to mind to you, if someone was thinking about making this decision for themselves?
Yeah, I think we do quantitative approach almost simultaneously, and as we talk through the numbers, we get a lot of insight as to how much they hate job or love their job, or what they would do when they retire. Some people actually prefer to continue to work, because regardless of whether they're ready with financial or not, and even if they're fully ready financially, they wouldn't retire just because they like their job. So I think presenting numbers give us opportunity to glean those informations.
Sure. So you kind of see the number approach, like gathering that data, as they call it, from the client, is actually just a way to get past the quantitative and get into the qualitative and see what else is maybe driving some of their decision making.
Right. Well, you can, it's like we're paid professionals. We can't just ask them directly, what would you do when you retire? It could get rather awkward. I think the more shrewd way to do it is, while gathering information and presenting the result and scenario analysis, we engage them to spit out more what they think, so to speak. It's not like from get-go you start asking, questions, but it's very tactfully asking right questions through a whole process to get a good idea. And at the end, we tell them, based on what we have discussed, I don't think this financial planning is perfect for you, because after all, you have told us that you're not that motivated to retire anyways. And usually we leave it at, we will follow up with you in 2 weeks, but we like you to think about what other scenario you would like to see. And that's really the final completion of, gathering intelligence as to what kind of retirement they're looking for. And most of the time they come back with different scenarios.
So good. So there's kind of an invitation on your part to bring the client into the question and maybe leave them challenged with a few things for their to bring back home and to kick around amongst themselves, and then share that with you in a future call as part of the conversation to help them work through and think through the decision. So maybe as one of the initial takeaways from this is that even in an advisory relationship, these aren't our decisions. It's not our life and it's not our money. I mean, it's all ultimately belonging to the client. We're here just trying to assist them in that process. So I kind of like that idea, to bring that out, that like, look, we can't make this decision for you. You're the ones who you have to make it, but we can help you make that decision. Mike, is that kind of your thinking on the matter too, that that's really the nature of our work as we work with clients?
Yeah, I very much love what Ujae is mentioning, because it expresses a humanization of the process, right? Like, it's a combination of both qualitative and quantitative assessment, but the results are only as good as the data that's provided and how truthful or authentic or genuine the data points are, right? And some of those data points can revolve around the individual or the spouse's health, could be the true numbers around spending habits. I would say that when trying to help clients decide whether or not it's the right time to retire or exit the workforce, if you're just going to base it in a vacuum off of the numbers, it's really driven off of, do we have enough assets that support our lifestyle, or is our lifestyle at a point to where we don't need a massive amount of assets to be able to have a high probability of success? But through the personal relationship that we're building with the clients, I think it's our duty to ask really good questions that they otherwise wouldn't have thought of, right? Just so that we can gauge more, because there are so many what if and scenarios that can arise through retirement deaccumulation planning or distribution planning, that we need to be able to prepare for, those what if moments of there being a medical scare before satisfying the timeline that they thought they were going to work towards, right? Let's just say someone's planning on working to age 67, but they have a heart attack at 62. Well, they just lost 5 years worth of potential income accumulation, right? Or medical insurance. If their employer had pretty strong medical insurance and now they're shifting over to Medicare at age 65. So then there's potentially a 3-year gap if they're pushed out of the workforce. So again, like there's a bunch of different scenarios that need to be accounted for. And we as the practitioners get to say, hey, we're educating you on these various scenarios and options. We're bringing questions to the table that you otherwise wouldn't have thought of. But at the end of the day, we'll present the treatment plan. You'll either opt into it and subscribe to it 100%, or you'll decide to do whatever you want, because like you mentioned, it is your money. You will ultimately decide what to do with it. We're just here to be your Sherpa and guide you along the way.
Yeah, that is a theme that's kind of standing out to me, is that, look, this, for any decision that someone faces and maybe would come to us asking for is, we can't make that decision for you. It's not our decision. It's your decision. That has to squarely stay on your shoulders. But, Ujae, you had shared, earlier in our conversation ahead of the call that, one of the benefits that we have as an advisor is kind of this nature of law of large numbers. And so, there may be one-off instances, or the odds of something happening to an individual's life are relatively low, but either in our experience or our specific book of business, things that are rather particular, or, a unique instance, or the only time a client will go through something isn't the only time we've gone through that thing as the advisor, to that client. So maybe could you speak a little bit, Ujae, to just how your, working with other clients has helped maybe to refine the advice you give in terms of the, when the client comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to retire, that you're able to bring, that prior experience, to the table with the client.
As you mentioned, we see things so often that, it's not so, sometimes when you hear what client says, you can kind of sense their fear, uncertainty, transitioning into retirement. If it's a money, you can assure them or give them very clear idea as to if you work 4 more years, this is what you can retire with budgets, XYZ budget. If you retire now, this is your budget. Now go and think about and come back to me so we can at least memorialize at this point in time what you want to hold on to as a plan. Now, that's what we do, but at the same time, when you talk to them, I ask quite a few qualitative questions. What are you planning to do when you retire? And sometimes they really don't know, and they just think that, well, let's see. I really don't know. And we tell them that then it's a problem. You might as well keep working. Because I can tell you 2 clients went back to work because they got bored, and that became a serious problem.
Well, maybe if I could interject just briefly, I'm kind of curious, what would be the serious problem? I have an idea or suspicion as to what the serious problem was, but like how did it become problematic? Just maybe to share that with the audience.
Especially clients with no children or friends, more isolated people. The work is their own source of network and socialization, and those people are hanging on to work, and they thought they retired because everyone around them was retiring at 65, but he really was going through, almost depression, like isolation. So that was not a good situation. So I recommend him to go back to work, and he's thankfully he got a part-time deal with him. So I would say another example is that we could explain to him, when you retire, people think of different things. They think that they'll buy another house in Florida, they will buy an RV, they will start traveling. And it's never perfectly where it makes financial sense. Sometimes, I think 2/3 of times they either have too much money but they don't have ideas to spend, or they have too little money but they have too much ideas.
Sure, okay.
So we can give them example of bad scenarios. I had a clients in their 70s, ran out of money. It wasn't pretty situation. You need to downsize because, they couldn't feed the horse. And I had a client who has to just sell horse right before we had a conversation. And that's not a very good situation to be in. And also, people when they retire, especially executive when they retire, they have sometimes they have half of their asset or more tied into their parent employer stock. And I love to give them example what I witnessed in 2008 and 2009. I had one client who picked up the phone and he told me 90% of retirement was in Citibank, and the Citibank lost about 90% percentage. And
oh golly,
yes, during financial crisis. So, it's sharing stories really resonate with the clients rather than just give them numbers and statistics.
Sure. So, we could help to quantify, is what I'm hearing from you, Ujae, and tell folks like, yes, financially, you have the means to retire today, and, that you're okay on the financial front, but maybe there's too much satisfaction you're finding from your job, or it's just part of your life. And so to now take you from that work, even though you don't need to work any longer for financial purposes, it's, you're not sure what else you would do. So that's kind of, the one way that you had described that. And then the second one is, look, you may love retirement and are living, rather well in it, but you're living a little too well. And unfortunately, the money's not keeping up. And, you may be faced or are faced with some hard decisions forthcoming because the money's just not there any longer in your situation. And do you, Mike, you and I know we work with a lot of younger clients. And so perhaps we can be looking ahead and helping folks to get ready for these two realities. But, what's some of your experience? Have you seen where you've worked with someone where they're, only it is their money, they can do what they wish with it, but, they're kind of, they're burning through their assets faster than what they have, and they're going to get themselves into trouble. I'm kind of curious if you've seen that too as part of your work.
So I've seen that less than those who have more than enough money but have a scarcity mindset.
Okay.
And you're right. I would say the my clientele breakdown is probably more skewed towards the accumulators as opposed to the deaccumulators or the retirees.
Right.
But in those conversations and trying to feed off of what you've expressed, Ujae, because I agree with a lot of it from a sentiment perspective. There's a lot of helping the client understand the intersection of rational and reasonable, and the rational side doesn't always align with the reasonable side. And so, one thing that pre-retirees and retirees just can't quantify, like you guys have expressed, is, well, what do I want life to look like when I stop working? And it's very much encouraged that you should walk them through a game plan, right? Like, I'm a former Division II lacrosse player. I've played sports my entire life. So we would always have a walkthrough the day or two before the game, right? Because you want to prepare for your game plan, but also the what if moments, so that it's not completely foreign to you the moment that it occurs. And so have them write out or draft out or go through an exercise of, these are the hobbies that I plan on participating in. These are the activities, or maybe I want to have some form of additional play money in my pocket. So I'll go be a greeter at a local convenience store, or I'll work at a Lowe's or something to that extent, because it's maybe not as taxing physically or mentally compared to what they were doing full time. And I like to refer to that as their third act. Now, I'll also mention that I think it's different for those who are purely employees of somebody else versus someone who's self-employed, because I think you can have an identity crisis, and that can bleed into the retirement, and that can also force individuals to hold on to their career longer because of the fear of the unknown, right? Potentially losing their identity. I think mothers go through something similar when they have a successful working career and then they transition into being a homemaker so they can focus on the family, right? It's a similar concept. Or for the fathers who transition out of their career to be homemakers. So there's a lot of open discussions that need to be had. And for the clients who, let's just say, retired earlier than than we had anticipated, or earlier than what the best output designed, I think there's a really hard coming to Jesus conversation that we have to have. And depending on our personalities, we may be prepared to do that, or we may not be, right? This is where we get to be a little bit more authoritative in saying, hey, if we make this decision, or because of this decision, this is the outcome, right? There could be a probability that if you live too long, that you might have to go back to work, or that your lifestyle is going to have to be cut in half, or, hey, you're just one medical scare away, a long-term care event away from bleeding through your assets. And now we're going to be relying solely on Social Security, Medicaid, and we may or may not have the surrounding village as far as relatives and friends to help support us through those efforts, right? Because culturally, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody depending on your heritage. So I would say I'm having that conversation a little bit less, and I wouldn't necessarily pin that to I'm just doing that fantastic of a job, right? Because I'm not working with clients from day one of their careers to when I meet them to the future, right? I'm meeting them at various points. But I think if retirees or individuals or investors in general can proactively start preparing for their future and trying to see the forest through the trees, they just improve the probability of success in designing the lifestyle that they hope for or want or would like to have when they decide to exit the workforce and their human capital goes away.
Got it. So Mike, that sounds, I really like this focus on, what's the game plan? Let's kind of walk through this, almost like a dress rehearsal of sorts. What exactly will you be doing in retirement? And are you ready to fill your day doing those things versus maybe how you're spending your day right now, as part of your thinking through of this situation. But I mean, Ujae, you had also shared, look, sometimes we have to just be, the hard truth to somebody and say, look, you could retire today, but this is kind of the new base. This would be the baseline of income that you're going to have for yourself. And we can improve that baseline if we go and have you work for another 3 to 4 years. And so, maybe it isn't that we have you cease work altogether, because you had alluded to this too, Ujae. Maybe it's just a phased out retirement where, we continue to get some sort of income and we do a bit of a coasting where we allow the current nest egg to be able to reinvest on itself and grow. And we just continue to meet our immediate current needs through some part-time employment, maybe get some health insurance benefits, and, allow things just to get a little bit further along before we go and, cut the cord altogether. So, there's various considerations here as to how we can allow this to play itself out. I'm kind of curious to UJ to go back to you in terms of any other problems maybe that you've come across. So I mean, it sounds like we've had some problems maybe where somebody just found themselves to be bored and they weren't happy or satisfied. They were socially disconnected, isolated, perhaps depressed, and they just needed to be engaged in some way. We could potentially have a problem where someone doesn't have enough resources. We've kind of chatted through that possibility of what does it look like if you spend too much in retirement, or you're living too rich. But there was another one that UJ, I'd like to have you chat to, but Mike brought it up, which is sometimes there's kind of a problem, if you will, in which someone's already accumulated too much money, and financially they're actually able to do this, but they're scared or they're hesitant to do so because they're afraid they don't have enough. And so kind of curious, what's been your experience, UJ, of working with somebody where it's not a financial thing that's keeping them from retiring, and if they want to retire they can, but they're afraid to do so. Like it's a big decision and they're afraid of what might happen if they move ahead. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, it's amazing to see and work for clients who have achieved really a lot in their career. They're senior level, high level at a respectful companies. You would think that they don't need to hear you saying, very simple things but they do. And I think they sometimes hire us as just a comfort plus, plus just assurance. So, for instance, client would ask us, how do I start creating cash flow? And you would tell them, you first start using your non-qualified account so that tax will be, favorable to you. And if there's any substantial tax situation, we can do Roth conversion, and see what the different outcome looks like. But at the end of the day, I always come back and tell them, these numbers, money you have at Schwab or other custodian is just a digit. You have to convert it to something meaningful in your life, whether it's a relationship building or community or building your meaningful life that give you sense of belonging and contribution. If you don't, it's just a digit, and it will, who knows, it doesn't mean anything. And also, as a financial advisor, I tell them, I have sometimes it's just as frustrating to see clients who are in their late 70s or 80s who have so much money, but have so little ideas to spend, idea and energy. And then they kind of, most of the time, they silent. I just see how they're reacting at that point. And I think they understand what I'm talking about. You can't just accumulate work and add more money to your retirement. At some point you have to spend, but if you miss out that window, sweet spot, I think it's usually between 60 to 75. It's not a whole lot of time. If you miss it, you can end up in a situation where a lot of my clients are in a situation where with lots of money, but so little ideas to know where to spend. And that's really frustrating to see, because it's we as an advisor like to see client happy with their money too, instead of just managing a lot of their money. So
yeah, I suppose the nature of some of our work is to help to derive or get a client to maybe have appreciation or satisfaction for what they've accomplished for themselves. It is maybe a little astonishing on the face of it. You would think that would just naturally happen, that a client would just appreciate, their achievements. But I think there can be, and I've seen this in my own work, where a person is so focused on that grindstone, if you will, that they haven't had a chance maybe to step back as much and just take a chance to, I don't know, breathe it in, or just take maybe even reward themselves. You can have such a focus of accumulate, that you're not as ready or comfortable. You've never really built that muscle, if you will, of spending and rewarding yourself and allowing yourself to appreciate this money. And so it feels like it's off limits. Like I can't touch this because it's always been off limits. The goal has been to grow and to grow it. And now, kind of by default, if we're going and using this for retirement, it may still grow. Hopefully with good planning, it does continue to grow, but it's not going to grow as much as it had. And maybe we kind of attach a degree of satisfaction to seeing that net worth, nest egg grow. But as you were saying a moment ago, it's like, well, I mean, it is just digits. It's just money. Like, like the satisfaction, the real benefit of having that money grow all those years is now to step in and enjoy the retirement it gives us, right?
You know what I really think sometimes when they don't touch their money, they like to see those 6-7 digit numbers and feel empowered. I'm wealthy. That means I have more options and ability. It's almost like when they retire, all their life, I want to be a senior consultant. I want to be a director. Next, I want to be vice president. I want to be executive vice president. That mindset carried over and over to their retirement account size. They literally get happy or depressed depending on the retirement size, even though they're not drawing from it. And in their 70s, when you have those type of clients, I think it's going to be a lot tougher conversation to convince them to spend money, because some do really think of their money as their identity.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important to note that, I mean, most of us, Mike and Ben and me, we're probably in our 40s, or at least it looks that way. But when you get to
I won't take
50s,
any offense to that.
I'm sorry. Hold on.
Mike.
Okay, maybe your 30s, but trust me, the 10 years feels shorter and shorter the longer you live.
Yeah.
And people who are close to retirement, to them, 10 years is really a breeze. And hitting the nail in the head in the conversation for those who have so much money, have no idea to spend, is that if you don't know how to reinvent yourself in the next 10 years, retire, and you just keep going back to work, you're going to be in a situation like so many of our clients in their 80s, really, you just sit on a big pile of money and really don't have either idea, energy, and interest. You need 3 components to make value out of your resources. You just have a less and diminishing of that, and you don't want to miss out that golden opportunity. But I guess it depends on whether the client is in their late 70s, and I keep encouraging them to go and spend, and once a year we meet in person. He tells me, because you told me, I took my son and my wife and my daughter to
That's good.
the ski hills, and it tells me, I mean, it was such a wonderful time. And I'm thinking all my back mind, well, first of all, that ski trip is not going to make a dent in your net worth.
Right.
But, it also tells you another thing. They didn't even think they could even spend that much money. Because all their life they're working, and they never thought that, they could afford. And surely numerically it's obvious, but emotionally it's so out of their mind. They never thought that they could take a whole family to a nice cruise trip. And it's pretty surprising and amazing to hear.
Well, and Ujae, I want to follow up on that in a second. But I mean, what's really coming out in my mind is, and it is a surprising tidbit, and it's one that I've seen firsthand as well. So I completely agree with you. There's like this great irony in which we are the ones giving, to the extent they'll allow us, we're like giving our clients permission to use their money and to spend it and say, it's going to be okay. You can do this. You don't have to feel guilty. It's not going to ruin you. You'll be okay. You'll survive. In fact, actually, you'll probably flourish and be better off. Like, that's what this whole money was all about. But like they need someone almost to tell them, yes, it's okay to do this. And so, Mike, I'd like to kind of get behind the notion of that here in a moment. Before I do, folks, if you're looking for someone to help you with this decision, and I think what kind of stands out in my mind is just this concern, this fear that can really be holding you back, perhaps unnecessarily. Be sure to take a look at the Catholic Financial Planners Network and the advisors that are found there. Many of them, all of them are, connected in bonds of faith and belief, and are wanting to help and assist you, in these decisions. And so be sure to look at the Catholic Financial Planners Network. Consider giving Mike and Ujae a call as well, to help, you work through this irony of overcoming, I call it permission, but it's really overcoming fear. And Mike, that's what I want to kind of pivot to next is that, I think, so much in the big decision makings that we all have to make, whether it's retirement, but it could be any number of things. In my own more immediate experience, I have some questions of hiring people and bringing on employees. And what I know that I'm facing with that is just this fear, the fear of what if it doesn't work out? What happens then? What's been your experience on really just addressing fear as part of any decision?
Well, that question is actually timely based off what's going on in the markets, for the past couple weeks, right? Like I think because of the quote unquote detox or healthy correction that we're seeing in the markets, it's depending on which side of the mountain you're on, the accumulation or the deaccumulation side, the anxiety, stress, or excitement for opportunity could vary from person to person, right? For the clients who are on the deaccumulation side, I think overcoming the fear requires a lot of personal touch, right? A lot of understanding of what's driving the emotions from a root level standpoint. And then using the data points to either support or confirm their fears, right? This is where we as practitioners get to wear multiple hats because I'm sure we can all agree, a lot of our sessions or consultations or workshops with our clients are probably more therapeutic or counseling than anything else. Right? Yeah, we get to geek out on the number side. I would imagine all three of us like that side of it, right? The emotional side of it, I think, is where you really get to build a bond for the client because they, like you mentioned, and what's been echoed, they really just want confirmation that, hey, I can spend this money and I will be okay. Because everything that I read in social media or in blogs or hear on the television screens telling me that I can't because it's so bad. Right. But we need to be able to dispel that, hey, the way that you're invested, maybe the way that your portfolio is designed, you're not really directly correlated to the S&P 500. So the fact that it's 7+% loss over the course of the last couple of weeks doesn't really impact you that much. Or, hey, your overall deaccumulation strategy, about 80 to 90% of your annual lifestyle need in retirement is being sent to you through, mailbox money because you have a personal pension or you have Social Security or just recurring income that we would deem as being quote unquote guaranteed. And so depending on what type of planning you implement and what you subscribe to, there's various ways to back into dispelling those concerns. But I think it's building that personal rapport and just re-emphasizing like the why and referring back to the plan, but then also making the necessary adjustments, which is where I believe that proactive planning is more important than just a one-time plan, set it and forget it, because we all know life changes pretty significantly and pretty quickly and things become obsolete. So, depending on what your portfolio looks like, there could be, or your retirement plan looks like, there could be a need for concern, or it could just be like, hey, let's just turn off the TV. Right? Like we know if we're flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, and most people probably, if you've listened to any of our episodes in the past that I've been on, know that I dislike flying, have the biggest fear of it from just a personal experience. But if I'm flying from Charlotte, North Carolina to San Diego, California, I've already baked into my mind that there's going to be some turbulence. I just don't know when, I don't know for how long, and I don't know how severe, but it's going to occur. Same concept with retirement planning and preparing for retirement. Like if you're investing in the market, there will be turbulence. We just don't know when, how severe, and for how long.
Right. I love that, Mike. So, part of the planning here for folks is, is to walk them through it, to think, what are we going to fill up our days and, how's this going to go? But also on that whole retirement portfolio, and we're pulling money out of the accounts. Like, look, this isn't necessarily always going to be a smooth ride. It's not guaranteed to be one, but that doesn't mean it's not a ride you can't have or you can't enjoy or isn't useful or beneficial to you. Let's just, mentally, prepare ourselves for some turbulence and know that, hey, we saw this coming. We expected it to happen. And now that it's here, like, no big deal. Like this in some ways was part of the plan. And so I think what I'd like to end with, guys, and we'll get your feedback on this. I've been reading a book lately that just really seems to resonate with this notion. And I think it may be a book you're familiar with. It's called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And, the focus and the intent of that book is like, look, we can't make life perfectly secure. We can't make it perfectly stable. Things are going to continue to be fearful. And at times things are going to be difficult. And really, this is somewhat of my wife, Deb, speaking into this too, but she's like, just take things a day at a time, do the best we can, make the most of what we can, but also, expect for turbulence, expect for things to be difficult and expect to be challenging. And let's build a situation that is the opposite of fragile. So instead of something being delicate, but easily breaks and falls apart and turns into crumbs or crumbles and dust, let's build something that can actually do well in the face of turbulence. And, maybe making things do well in the face of turbulence is perhaps a big ask. I don't know how easily we do that, but like that's the notion of the book. And what I have found to be just super enthralling about that is like, look, any of us can do really is just take life a day at a time and to see, the upheaval that sometimes occurs, not necessarily as a negative thing, which is, it tends to be our response, but to actually see it as something that's positive, that's good. And it's not just negative things that come from this, good things come from it too. So I'm kind of curious, Ujae, with just this notion of anti-fragile and working with clients, have you kind of seen that in some of your work with retirees where it's actually maybe turbulence to some degree is a good thing? Have you ever phrased or presented it that way to a client?
Well, when we present financial plan, we inform them that it takes into account market ups and downs and, simulation using softwares we have, like a Monte Carlo simulation, to inform them that you have a still very high probability of success, not run out of any money. But sometimes they're pretty successful at calming them down. Sometimes we don't. And I think it's also related to personality differences, and we can't always 100% persuasive. But we do make it very clear that the plan takes into account occasional similar frequency and magnitude of recessions and corrections and all of that, and hope they understand it. But I did see quite a few people who were about to retire and end up not retiring because of the last 3 years when market going up and down. They were unnerved by that.
Sure. So when it comes time to finally step off, like that's, I suppose that's the moment of truth, as they say. It's like, are you able to step away? And so, well, Mike, I know you've got some thoughts here as well. Do you mind sharing, what's your notion of anti-fragile, or does that resonate with some of your experience or the work that you have with clients?
No, it does very much. And this being, a Catholic podcast at its core, I think when those conversations come up, it presents an opportunity for us as devout practicing Catholics to really step in and evangelize a little bit, right? Like, how do we die to ourselves? And it being the Lenten season, I think it's perfect timing for that question. But, how do we die to ourselves, and how do we, leave everything behind, pick up our cross and carry it? Because at the end of the day, our script is already being written, right? The hairs numbered on our head have already been counted from the day that we were created. And so, like, we can spend energy, being anxious, scared, and everything else, or we can learn to lift that up to Christ and allow him and the saints and the Blessed Mother to carry that concern for us, right? So, offering up opportunities for, if it's a Catholic client or a Christian client, what are some things that you can do to help with those internal feelings, right? Whether it's some sort of prayer to Our Lady, Undoer of Knots, or some other sort of litany, like one that I'm doing right now is the Litany of Humility, which is really humbling. But, as far as like the technical side and building out the plan, like I often harp on, well, how do we build some financial fortitude, right? Like, how do we fortify your plan? And there's various ways to do that, because there are so many different tools in the toolbox that we as independent practitioners have access to. And, one of the things that I subscribe to from a retirement deaccumulation planning standpoint is a lot of what Dr. Wade Pfau puts out there. I recently did my retirement income certified professional designation, and he's often shown in the videos and the training and the educational piece. But, there are studies where for retirement plans that have more guaranteed recurring income that replaces a higher percentage of lifestyle need, it really eliminates any concerns with the market exposed portfolios or assets, because you're pulling less off of them. So, I don't think there's a one size fits all answer, but I would say depending on your retirement plan, one, should you be concerned? Talk to your financial advisor. Say, hey, am I protected against what's going on right now? Are we were we prepared for this? Right? Or, is this an opportunity to take advantage of the resettling of the prices and getting into the market to further along the last couple of years I have before I exit the workforce?
So absolutely. So what I'm gathering from that again, Mike, is that, look, I mean, part of our work as advisors is that when you have questions, when you have concerns, if you are, we don't want you to deny that or suppress them by any means. That's not good for anybody. Part of our work is for you to share and express those to us. But then we can also respond back to you, what you had shared there, Mike, of fortifying the plan. Like, part of how you fortify a plan is, responding into the future, it's day by day, step by step, with fortitude, and hopefully we're turning to, resources of faith to see with the eyes of faith, to look ahead into the future and say, look, it's going to be all right. Maybe there is some ups and downs right now, but we're all working through, but it's going to be all right. And we're going to keep working at it together. And that's what's going to make it so okay. So,
and the last thing I would add, I would say that all three of us today would probably agree that if there's an opportunity, just because we've looked under the hood and we've run the stress test and the various scenarios, to tell a client, hey, you can actually retire at age 62 or 60 as opposed to 67 or 70 like you had thought of. And, we've run various scenarios using Monte Carlo simulator and whatever it might be. Like, I would rather present that than confirming, hey, you are going to have to work towards 70. Because one thing I think we can all agree on is that tomorrow's not promised. And that's been pushed to the forefront for a lot of pre-retirees coming out of the pandemic. Or, my mother has shared with me in her career where coworkers have been working until 65, 67, they retire, and 2 years later, they're no longer with us, right? Or some sort of medical scare happened, and it's not the retirement that they dreamed of because of these unknowns. So, there's definitely prudence required, but work with your advisor, someone that you trust and has your best interest in mind, and try to confirm the data.
Absolutely. I don't know if I could say it much better than that, Mike. So I think we'll wrap it up with some of those concluding thoughts. Mike and Ujae, folks, thanks for being on the call, both of you gentlemen. Folks, again, if you're interested in following up with them, you can find them at the Catholic Financial Planners Network. But Ujae, quickly, if someone wanted to, to find you, what's the best means for them to reach out and get connected with you?
They can find my wife, Sarah Kang, from the Catholic Network Financial Advisors Network. I don't know, her name is Sarah Kang, certified financial planner. A lot of our clients find us through online. You could reach to Ben Martinek if you're wondering where to find us, but I don't know.
I know. Well, we'll redirect you. If you reach out through the Catholic Financial Planners Network, folks, we'll get you in touch with Ujae and Sarah. They're a great husband-wife team out of the Twin Cities area. And then for Mike, for just one last time, for anyone who might like to reach out and connect with you, where can they find you at?
Yeah, a couple avenues. You can go to our website, www.genesiswealthplanning.com. See the services that we offer. There's an Ask Me Anything page if you have certain questions, or if you want to coordinate a consultation, you can schedule it there. A little plug, we also have our own personal podcast, Financial Fortitude. So you can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, and even YouTube. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you just look up Michael R. Acosta, it should pop up as long as it's affiliated with Genesis Wealth Planning.
Awesome. All right. Well, Mike, Ujae, thank you again so much for being on the call. Audience, thanks for tuning in and listening with us. We love having you here, and looking forward to creating another great episode to you in the future. But in between now and then, God's blessings to each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.